All right, Steven Puri, thank you for joining us on the Personal Success Podcast.
Oh, we're going to have some fun.
Absolutely we are. Absolutely we are. So diving in, who is Steven Puri and what does he care about?
5'11", dark hair for the people playing at home or in their car. How deep do you want to go? No, a better answer is this. If you are listening at home or in your car, here's what is interesting about this episode that may be different than other ones you've heard, because Ryan, you've had some great people on talking about important things in life. I happen to be one of the few people you'll meet who has been a senior executive at several motion picture studios and also raised over $21 million of venture and run 3 startups, 1 successful exit, 2 failures. And as they say, you learn a lot from both, especially the failures. So I talk a lot now about the lessons that I have learned about how to do great things for yourself, move your life forward, move your team's life forward. And really happy to be here. But that's a lot what I share.
Well, thank you again for your time.
And we can talk about Die Hard if you want. I know you do. It's your favorite movie. Admit it. Admit it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to. I've never seen Die Hard. So there we go. Here comes the hate mail. I need to, and literally I have no idea why. I just haven't done it. And, people literally walk up to me around the holidays and be like, okay, listen, I need to know who you really are. Die Hard, a Christmas movie or not? And I'm like, I've never seen it. And they're like, what? Okay. That tells me all I need to know. So
it's kind of shocking. And you've lost a lot of friends that way. And I understand. It's just, it's weird. And by the way, just so you know, every time I have been engaged with someone who's like, hey man, I know, you were an exec at Fox on the Die Hard franchise. Tell me, like, Die Hard, Christmas movie? Not Christmas movie, right? Here is the best answer I can give. And after you watch the movie, which you will do someday it's going to hear me trapped on a flight and everything was broken except one movie that'll play on the little screen, okay? It's going to be Die Hard, and you're going to laugh because the universe is like, you're going to watch it now, Ryan, right? Okay, so that said, when you do watch it, I hope you remember this thought, which is the great stories, especially films, because films are not just like oral stories where you're relating things and there's no visual. Films are the amassing of how does the music, the costume, the locations, the photography, the storytelling, the editing, all feel like they're cut from one cloth. Tell this story, right? Die Hard is Taken. It's the same movie. There are a number of movies that are just simply Die Hard, which is to say the organizing principle is I have lost someone I care deeply about and I need to get them back to be whole, right? And fundamentally, movies are a heroic force with some goal, and they have some flaw. And when they collide with the opposing force, if they succeed, it's a heroic, success and action movie from a studio. And if they fail, it's a Greek tragedy, right? So when you think about Die Hard in those terms, you're going like, okay, it is a man who has lost the love of the female in his life that's important, right? And this was made in a period of time when suddenly women were in the workforce, making more money than men. And this spoke to that zeitgeist, right? So Bruce is a beat cop. He runs around the streets of New York, kicking and jumping and shooting and, beat cop street stuff, right? His wife moves to Los Angeles, where she works for a very wealthy Japanese firm. She works in a very tall building with all this technology, with guys who have expensive watches and talk about going to eat and things like that, right? So that story is about how do you take a guy who has lost his wife to this modern world of women are successful and they don't need the men, and he gets the woman back. So in the beginning of the movie, you'll see he has to travel to Los Angeles where she's left him and gone, right? And he wants her back. And he ultimately says to this limo driver who picks him up. The limo driver's like his first day at work. He's like, hey man, I'm a new limo driver. What's this like? Where are you going? What are you doing? And of course, Bruce Willis playing John McClane is like, hey man, screw off. Like, screw off. I don't want to talk to her. Until he finally is so annoyed, he tells the limo driver, he's like, here's the deal. My wife left me and I'm coming in. And the limo driver says to him in like a sentence or two, the entire movie, he looks at Bruce and he goes, okay, so let me get this straight. So your wife left you for this big firm here and you came back like a caveman to throw her over your shoulder and drag her back to New York. And Bruce looks at him and kind of smiles and goes, yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, right? The end of the movie is Bruce walking out of a burning building, holding his wife over his shoulder like a caveman, and they're reunited, right? The family's way back together. When in a year are families reunited? At the holidays. So that is how it is cut from one cloth, is you set that movie at Christmas.
I have to say that was probably the most compelling description I've ever heard of it. So I don't know if you just speak my language more, but I'm like, I did not realize the movie was about that. But you're right. There's sort of there's something archetypical about it. There's something, there's a common experience that maybe is, I don't know, I want to say Freudian, but maybe more Jungian.
No, you know what? I so appreciate you making that reference because I'll tell you this. Yes, I've been part of making some big movies, 100, $200 million budgets, right? And it takes a huge crew to make that. I'm not saying I made these movies. I'm saying I was part of them where you're contributing, trying to make something great. Even the bad movies, you set out to make something great, and it's just hard to make a great one, right? So I worked on Last Action Hero. Maybe not the best movie ever, but whatever. So here's the thing. The best of the big movies, if you strip out the genre element, take out the guns and the laser beam in space and the Godzilla monster and the aliens that land and whatever else, you're left with a core story, what we call an organizing principle, that is usually about a family, right? So if you look at Die Hard, yeah, strip out Rickman and, tourists and guns and trucks and it's about a guy who's like, man, I lost my wife. I just want her back. I want my kids back. I want my family. You look at Taken. It's the exact same movie. The female that he loves is his daughter, but it's the exact same thing. Bruce looks at the wealthy, office building and the whole thing, and he's like, I can't compete with this. Liam Neeson in Taken. You seen Taken?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so just when you watch Die Hard, you're going to go, this is beat for beat the same movie as Taken. He goes to give his daughter, the boombox for her birthday, and new dad brings her like a pony. And he has that same look on his face. How do I compete with this? I'm a guy who's learned how to kick and shoot and jump. And what do both movies have? Both movies, as much as horrible things happen and, they have a wish fulfillment. Those movies are actually not, oh my God, the worst thing happened. My daughter was kidnapped. Oh my God, the worst thing happened. My wife is going to. No, they are wish fulfillment for the hero. Because if you ask Bruce, how would you get your wife back? Yes, Liam, how would you get your daughter back? He would say, if she ever needed someone who could jump and run and kick and shoot, she'd love me again. And what happens? The guys walk into the movie and it becomes, you need someone. You need a man who can jump and run and kick. At the end of the movie, the women they lost are hugging them, right? So that's what's interesting about that. It's about movies. So I'll tell you, the same thing you said is true of, we worked on Star Trek 11, right? Which is the reboot with Chris and Zach. Did you see that one, Ryan?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So, by the way, I die in that movie. If you ever watch it again, in one of the battle scenes, Spock jumps in, Zach jumps in Kirk's chair, Chris Pine's, captain's chair, and he radios down to to Bones. And he goes, he's looking for Chief Medical Officer Puri, me, right? He's Dr. Puri. And Bones is like, Dr. Puri died on deck 6, and Spock's like, well, you're Chief Medical Officer now, Bones, right? Which was an inside joke with, on the movie.
Yeah.
So because I died, that is how Bones became the Chief Medical Officer of the Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
So, and in that movie, if you, again, strip out the photon torpedoes and the Klingons and the spaceships and it's Cain and Abel. That's what the movie is, dude. Kirk and Spock are two brothers who are going to kill each other, and they lose the movie until they have it out. And when they get over their shit, they start winning the movie. That is the entire core of that movie. Everything hangs off that spine. And a lot of the great movies are that simple. They're about two brothers, about a husband and wife. They're about simple things. And then you dress them up with photon torpedoes and space lasers and, ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's something underlying what you're talking about here. And I love the insight that, movies are about family. They're about, they have some form of family, right? You mentioned Star Trek.
Relate to that.
And the brothers, right?
Yeah.
And then the sort of, the husband-wife dynamic or the father-daughter dynamic. And I imagine you can come up with an example for every single one there. When did you sort of gain this insight?
Most of the big ones. There are films that are made where you kind of boil them down and there's not much there, but they're just maybe so fun you watch them anyway. Like there's some movies that I've watched where I'm like, there's no there, but man, that was a fun hour and a half, right? So
yeah.
But I do think the great ones and the ones where I was involved, we do aspire to say, if you didn't have all the fancy set dressing, it's still, there's truth to it. This is how, my brother and I had fought and have not talked for a long time. And I know what it's like to go through those periods where you're just you're grumpy with someone that is your family. And we tried to get that out, in some of these movies.
When did you come to this sort of insight that, like you said, the big ones are really sort of about this sort of belonging and family?
I will tell you that in as much as I learned a lot about story, when I was at DreamWorks, I ended up as an executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtzman Orsi. And Alex, Tristan, Bob Orsi are, Bob actually just sadly died recently, which is terrible because he's an awesome guy, but they're great guys. And they, when I met them, had written like Mission Impossible 3, The Island Rewrite, the Zorro movie, a bunch of stuff like that. Steven had brought them on a lot. And it was when I went to work with them that I started to understand deep story, like what's really happening underneath. Not like, oh, this is a great script, it works really well, but that sense of like, here are the fundamental truths about us as humans that are represented in this movie. And hopefully, that it's not so obvious because, you're distracted with all the fun of it. And I'll tell you an interesting thing is, so do you remember Transformers 1? Did you see that by any chance?
That one, yeah.
Okay. So here's the deal is Steven had sent them the script, the first draft from Transformers 1, and wanted them to rewrite it. And they said no, which is very rare. They know to Steven.
Yeah.
Big Steven, not me, right? And he did it a second time. And their agents at CAA were like, guys, like, we can say the quiet part out loud. Like, Steven wants you to do this. Do we need to say more? Like, there's nothing where you're like, and Alex and Bob, to their credit, said, no, we totally get that. We're not idiots, but we don't want to fail. And we don't know how to write a robots fighting movie. Like we can't relate to it. So Steven called them down to set. He was shooting, I think it was War of the Worlds at the time, and was shooting like downtown nights in Los Angeles, right? The Tom Cruise version, right? They had to go down there dutifully, and in between takes, Steven's like, come to my trailer. And so they sat there, a couple minutes of, small talk, and then Steven goes, hey, so you don't want to rewrite Transformers for me? Like, what's up with that, boys? To Alex's credit, he said, we just don't want to fail you. We don't know the truth of a robots fighting movie. And Steven said this, which completely changed the game. He said, it's not. It's American Graffiti. And Alex and Bob were like, okay, hold on. Let's just talk about that. And Steven's like, here's the deal. And, he obviously, George and friends and all that. And he said, no, it's a movie about, in the United States, where the car culture is so important, there is a rite of passage when you are a teenage boy and you get the car, because that unlocks the world, being able to go on a date or go out with your friends or do something. It's freedom. It represents all this. So he said, I think what the movie should really be is it's about how cars factor into that, because the boy wants to get the car and what it represents here in this American Graffiti sort of world. And then it becomes a genre movie when the car talks, and suddenly you realize it's not just a car, but it's not. So he's like, that's the way into it. That's the character story. And if you strip out again the talking cars and the robot stuff, it's fundamentally boy wants to get girl, and he realizes to get girl, he must get car.
Wow.
And that's how that movie opened up. And then Alex and Bob were like, okay, we could write that. And that's how they came to write Transformers.
That's incredible. And that makes a lot of sense now when I think back on the movie. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah. And I learned all that with them. Like, they were absolutely the ones who opened it up to me. We just go, oh my God, there's another layer that I didn't understand underneath what I've been doing. And they're amazing guys.
So I want to tie these insights back to your life, Steven. And so with this, these.
Let's talk about me. This is great. Keep going.
This deeper insight, this level of, like you said, the rite of passage movie that American Graffiti was, and him just pointing out, hey, this is what the story actually is. Let me put it in a different frame. How does your understanding of story and the real authentic human experience, how have you used that to sort of make sense of your own life?
Well, I do recognize what we said before about, stories are fundamentally heroic force wants something, opposing force. Heroic force has some sort of internal obstacle they need to overcome in addition to the external thing, right? And that kind of is what you were watching play out. So there is no story without opposition.
Absolutely.
Right? The story of I walked to the store, I bought some milk, came back is not really compelling, right? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Unless the milk becomes a robot. I'm kidding. That's a joke. That was a Transformers joke. That's just a joke.
Yeah.
So that said, in my life, I've definitely, as we all do, try to make sense of it in hindsight, looking backwards, like, how do these things all factor together? And I'll tell you, for me, this is how I make sense of my life. Anyone who's read the show notes or, knows anything about me, great. But if you don't, I'll lay it out for you, which is my life is a series of ridiculously lucky things that fell in my lap, coupled with me going, ooh, this could be something, and then working really hard to make something of it. So I don't want to discount, hey man, I'm a fortunate guy. Like, lucky stuff happens to me, but also that I've really endeavored to say, like, okay, well, how do I rise to meet this occasion? And I'll give you a couple examples of that. When I was little, like little. My parents were both engineers at IBM. Your mom is a great ice skater. You probably learned to ice skate when you're little, right? So I learned how to code. I would go with my mom to the computing center and, she'd let me submit jobs, when she was doing her actual work. And so when I went to the University of Southern California for, school, I was a Watson Scholar. So I had a job as a junior software engineer whenever I wanted it to make money. So that was a fun way to make money because it's kind of a skill I had and I liked coding, but I wasn't formally in school for that. Now here's the lucky break. I'm at USC in LA. The big industries are obviously entertainment, aerospace, things like that. I was there when computers became powerful enough to manipulate film, which had typically been done, with magnetic tape and photochemical films and things like that. And suddenly computers are powerful enough where you could have non-linear editors like the Avid. You could have, like audio editing like Pro Tools. Silicon Graphics made equipment to manipulate images, massive film images over time. You could digitize it now, which had been too big a data set in the past to manipulate that way, right? And that obviously gave rise to Pixar and all these like digital animation companies. So I was there. A lot of my friends in school, USC is a great cinema TV school, and we're in that school. So I had a great exposure to cinema TV in college, and I was around when it was like, ooh, there's this new collision between engineering and creative, and I spoke both languages. So it was almost like being plucked out of the chorus line of like, hey, you know how to speak engineer and you understand a little bit of creative. Come here, we need you to talk to a director and then talk to a visual effects artist about how we do this. And my career took off, right? I embraced it.
Yeah,
I went
well,
with it. Boom.
I'm curious there because, you said like you were coding, you were sort of going down this engineer path. So was it, I could see how somebody, it might not be obvious that there was that collision that you were so aware of.
Mhm.
I mean, was it, you said it was sort of being like plucked out of the chorus line. Was it just natural or is it something that you said, oh, this is, I see the bridge and I'm going to cross it. What was that experience like?
It was a half being invited in, like being around people that are doing that, and half being, you know, like leaning toward it and being like, I could actually do that. I could help with that, and getting in at an early stage, like when that business was new and learning from the bottom up. Like I learned how to do everything, like run a film recorder, which is a very technical task, but it teaches you a lot about how color works, how exposure works, how, the controls you have through the development of film, the gamma curves of, the different film emulsion layers and stuff. So that was super interesting. It ended up meaning I worked with a lot of directors very quickly because producing digital effects is an expensive proposition, right? So you get directors that are allowed to do that. They get the studio budgets because this is not their first film. They've had a couple hits and the studio's like, okay, here's $15 million, go make the visual effects. So I got to work with John McTiernan, got to work with Cameron on True Lies, David Fincher on Seven, the Hughes brothers, Dead Presidents, Mel Gibson. I did Braveheart and Immortal Beloved with him, like a bunch of films. And then I met Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin when they had come off Stargate and they were doing their next movie and produced the digital effects for Independence Day, which won the Academy Award for visual effects, which I'll be blunt, being anywhere near the visual effects on that helps your career. It's like, oh my God, you guys won an Academy Award, right? So Roland, Dean, and I got along really well. And at the end of Independence Day, we teamed up and started a company together to do digital visual effects. Raised about 15 million, which again, easier to do when your film has just won an Academy Award, the last thing you guys did, right? So built that to about 82 people. We sold that when I was 28-ish. And, as one thinks in their 20s, you're more successful than you are, more smarter than you actually are, more good looking than you actually are. All the things you think when you're 20s, and later life teaches you it's actually harder than that. You were lucky, right? So sold that. And then the next lucky break was I had a moment to travel. I had some cash in my pocket, very, grateful for that. And my girlfriend was a flight attendant for Air France. So we traveled a bunch and spent a year or two just sort of thinking about what did I want to do next. And I realized I wanted to kind of move upstream. And instead of being hired to help people make a portion of their film, I was like, well, how could I be involved in actually getting the film made? And I realized how different that industry was. It seems like it's all film. It's all like one big thing, but it's not really. To be a craftsman making something as opposed to someone creatively finding ideas, crafting the script, trying to get it packaged with writers, directors, actors, money, get it made. It's a really different part of the business, So that was an interesting transition for me. And again, had some lucky breaks, met some people, I knew some people, and then worked hard. And that's how I ended up, at DreamWorks. And then Fox recruited me You know, they had Avatar money. Like the studio had suddenly a lot of money and they had been doing bottom feeder kind of stuff. And they were like, listen, we'll double your salary if you'll come here and bring with you some of the talent, the relationships you have with like the Billy Rays and the David Ayers and Alex and Bob and Damon Lindelof from Lost and like, you know, guys like that I had worked with and I knew. So Tom was the chairman of Fox Film and Entertainment, said, hey, you know, I bet you grew up on Die Hard and, you know, Wolverine and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I remember watching Die Hard when I was little. He's like, do you want to be the executive running the next one? That's pretty impelling. You know,
Yeah.
you're like, really? Me? Okay. So I went to Fox and it was a horrible 2 years. It was a complete culture mismatch for me. Probably one of the worst jobs of my life. So that, to end the story, when I left Fox, I thought, I got to get out of this. And what's the only other thing I know how to do is engineering. So I was like, let me find some problems I think I can solve with engineering solutions. Did 2 companies, raised about 3 million for each. Both failed. And I felt humiliated. I was just like, I'm an idiot. Why did I do this? Should I have left film? I don't know. And in the course of looking at what I learned, one of the biggest things I'd learned was, man, I've worked with some great people in both these creative fields and the technical fields. And there are similar ways in which the high performers work. Like there's like the secrets of doing that. And that led me to research the past 6 years. What is it they do? How do they do it? And then how to share it. So, and that brings us here, Ryan, to your podcast.
Well, I love that story. Like you can't help, I think the listeners are probably doing this too, just comparing it to their own sort of journey. And you mentioned that, hey, you just it's sort of a right place, right time thing, but you still had to make that work.
Got to work hard. Yeah.
You got to work hard. And it's funny because I think back, mine was a bit, my journey was in sort of the music industry and I had opportunities to play for bigger bands. I remember like negotiating, being like, I'm gonna have to make this is like a laughable amount of money. I was like, listen, I make like $300 a week at my job. You guys are gonna have to do that. And they're like, okay, we're gonna pay you $1,000 a show. And I was like, mouth on the floor type thing. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I just made it, but then I didn't work. I thought about that and I was like, this is it. Like I didn't work hard. So I can see, I had to learn that lesson. I was like, when you get the lucky break, so that really resonates with me because I think a lot of us will have lucky breaks, whether we realize it or not. You got to do the work to make that work. Right. And I think I love that you continue to figure out how it would grow. Right. So you sold this business, you got this job as an executive, Fox recruited you, and you're like, okay, wrong turn, not for me. Right. And then after that, you sort of have these 2 failures that, I think that just sounds really difficult, especially after selling at 28 years old. Like you said, youth is wasted on the young, right?
True. Yes.
You just proved that I'm this smart and all this stuff. And then so you bring that wisdom into the next phase and there's these failures there. And I guess, what was that experience like of just, what was it like to wake up in the morning?
Let's probe the pain. You want to stick the finger in the wound? Okay, let's talk about the wound, right? So and now obviously a lot of people have gotten out of film and tech has, been booming and we're all AI creation is living in LLMs and stuff, right? So at the time when I left Fox, it was not popular. Like none of my friends had left to go to tech yet. And I remember that was a conversation where I was in a semi-prestigious job, being a senior executive at a studio, running action franchises. And I left and people were like, what's this thing Puri's going to do? How's it going to go? And I got to tell you, when that did not work, those 2 companies didn't work, I felt humiliated. I would go to the dry cleaners and bump into friends and be like, hey, Steven, how's it going with your thing? And you're like, oh, Ryan, I'm probably shutting it down. I kind of want to kill myself. It's failed. And that was terrible. The one thing I did that I think was valuable out of that was both times, because I raised about 3 million for each, right? So it was having to talk to your investors and be like, listen, I'm sorry. The picture I painted of where I think we could take this is not going to be the future, right? And I don't think we should raise more because like with one company, we got to about 60,000 monthly actives and we really need to be at hundreds of thousands at that inflection point. And there just wasn't a Series A to be had at that point. So you got to have that tough conversation. I lost like $750,000 of my own money plus, millions of other people's money. And I felt personally responsible, right? So you have that conversation. Luckily, most of the investors, all but one that I had to have the conversation with, were like, it was great working together. What do you want to do next? There's only one investor who was like, oh my God, you lost my money. And he had put in 10,000. He was like a friend of a friend. I was like, dude, I'm sorry about your 10,000, but it's called venture capital because it's a venture, right? It's risk. That's the investor conversations went better than I thought. And I was like, I will figure out what I want to do next, and I'll let you know. I'll give you first dibs on that. We'll go from there. And the smartest thing I did was both times I sat in this chair in my place in West Hollywood. This beautiful light that comes over my shoulder, and I took a pad of paper, like old school, like pencil on paper. I didn't want to dictate into my phone. I want to have the feeling of like actually writing this. I wrote, what did I do wrong? What would I tell myself if I go back 3 years and be like, hey, dude, like, here's what you're going to need to do differently. And both times the top line of that sheet was the word listen. And I realized I had become too egotistical, that mentality of Henry Ford, like, well, if I listen to everyone, we'd be making faster horses, or something, or Steve Jobs, like, no one asked me for the so-and-so, and there is something to be, there's something to being a visionary. Maybe I'm not a visionary, but there's something to that. And when you stick to your guns and when you are open to input is a fine balance. And I just wrote to myself saying, you know what, in hindsight, there were some people who did understand the path ahead of me better than I did and had given me valuable things that I hadn't acted on, little tips about like, hey, watch for this. This deal is going to work out this way. And I thought to myself, going forward, trying to be less egotistical, trying to be more open to this. I mean, have a vision, lead, not be wimpy and like, I don't do what people tell me, but be more open to consider like, well, what if Ryan's right? How would that play out? How would I test what Ryan's saying without going too far afield? And that hugely affected me with the Sukha Company, the company I run now. Like the reason it's working is we have a group chat. Tony, my partner, and I, we talk to our members every day about what's working, what's not. You can see in the retention metrics, you can see in the referral metrics when we launch a feature and people are like, this is dope. And they tell 5 friends, or, 3 people cancel in the first 10 minutes. And you're like, ooh, we should get rid of that feature. That was a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you really kind of took on there's a depth in your sort of way of being, right? That you kind of accessed, when you took that piece of paper and you're like, okay, not that I need to listen to what everybody says, but maybe I should have just considered more. There's just a certain thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
Would you say that
sure.
characterizing that right? And I think that's a good sort of segue. I wanted to talk about Sukha.
Ooh, we're going to segue? Well, it's a fancy word. Let's do
I
it.
know,
Okay.
right? Isn't that something you ride around that I always fall down on every time I try? But anyway,
You ever see Arrested Development? You ever see that show? No.
I
Okay.
have, yes, I have.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. I'm like, should I be making film, TV references, or maybe not? Yeah, I love that the Will Arnett character was always riding around on his Segway, right? That was
Yeah.
pretty funny. Yeah.
I'll never forget. I was in my 20s. I was a server at this restaurant, and somebody said to me, "Have you ever seen Arrested Development? You remind me of the guy who rides the Segway." And so I had to go check it out then, and I was completely, I don't know, so there's something about my voice was similar to Will Arnett's or whatever, but I was like, wait a second, what? I thought they just thought it was a jest, I guess, but
Maybe the nose or the forehead. I don't know. Who knows what to make of that?
Maybe. Yeah, you never know.
Okay. So there you were working in a restaurant and you're wondering, Steven, let's segue.
Yeah, there you go. And then I'm just curious about Sukha. It seems like those events are connected. You're at this point where you take this piece of paper out where you're like, okay, let's kind of go deep on this and sort of debrief. And then there's something that has led you to this productivity system. I guess maybe tell us a little bit about what it is and about the connection there, if any.
I would be delighted to talk about it. Let me begin by saying this thing, which is about the why. Throughout my career, I've worked with people who are amazing. I have worked for people, worked with people, had people work for me that truly have done things where it's like, wow, you pulled that off, right? I have developed a very strong thesis that we all have something great inside us. And the question of this lifetime is, are you going to get it out or not? And there are enough forces in this world working to ensure that you don't. There are trillion-dollar companies whose business model, they used to obscure. Zuckerberg would go to DC and pretend and dance around and laugh about ads. And now they're totally upfront. They're like, our business model is stealing people's lives, period, full stop. The more of it we do, the better the shareholder report looks. We're going to do more of it next quarter. We're trying to figure out how to make more at the end of the year, right? So they have the most money. They can pay the best behavioral psychologists, the best designers, the best engineers with the sole goal of how can we steal more of Ryan's life? Because we actually don't benefit if he does the thing he's capable of. We benefit if he gives us his life. And it's as if Mark were to call you up, or Elon, or any of these guys running this, and just say, Ryan, listen, I'd like your life. And I'm going to sell it to these advertisers and I'll keep the money, but I'll give you some dancing cat videos, buddy. How's that? Is that good? Is that a good deal?
Yeah. Wow.
And they do it so well. It sounds ridiculous to say it that way, but they do it so well. It works. It works fantastic. Every notification ding, every wording of everything, every rounding of a corner on a button, every color has been A/B tested to go, this is the most slippery slope down into do nothing with your life. And I think that's criminal. If fundamentally what we want is we want to live in a world of people who are doing the thing that they're capable of, like executing their greatness, it's not where you want to spend your time. So all that sort of setting of the table of like, why the hell I do this, it comes down to that idea of like, if there is someone who says, I am not going to die with that thing still inside me, I'm not going to be that 80-year-old girl or guy sitting on the sofa, scrolling and double tapping, being like, I could have been somebody. I had that idea for a book, a business, an app, a restaurant I was going to open. Yeah, but I could have done that. That's miserable. And you know what? No one wants to be around that person either. Right?
Yeah.
So
I know.
how do we help you today? Because that tug of war for your life, you have the trillion-dollar companies with the smartest people on one side. On the other side, it's you. Right? Is that a fair tug of war? So you have to have your allies, just like in a movie, first act, things change. The world gets bad or something needs to be corrected. Top of the second act, you go assemble the allies. We have to go through the Shire and get all the elves to go to Mordor, with that sort of thing, right? Many of these movies work that way. Many stories work that way. So that is really what I've been focused on, is saying smart people have written about this. I've seen the problems that I have in actually doing anything of value. How do I solve them in a way that works for me? Because people have made it freely available. Like, here are the solutions. And I just thought, and here's what I do. Now, this is all that preamble to say, here's what I do. We created a website that takes the tools you need to be in a flow state and puts them behind one play button. So if you say, I want to do great work, I want to be, in control of my life, this makes it really easy. And have you ever been in a flow state? Have you experienced that kind of like thing? Or?
It's funny how the start of sort of this journey is that I started, I was in a new city by myself, single, alone.
Where?
And
What city?
Cincinnati, Ohio. So
Oh, okay.
I'm here, everything's shut down. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I signed up for this course from the Flow Research Collective.
Stephen
And
Kotler's, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And
Great.
it completely changed. First of all, it was mostly the knowledge, but it completely, it just got me close to different people. And I was able to connect with people that sort of, one of the things that came from that is this podcast. But I wanted
That's awesome.
the thing that drove me to it is the ad. It was like, increase your productivity by 500%, which is funny now, but the flow state was something that, yeah, I've been in a flow state. We talk about it a lot on here, but absolutely.
Okay, that's amazing. So just for whoever is driving or listening at home and may have a more passing understanding of it than you do or than I do, let me just set the table for a second, and then let's get into that, because that's, I think, really core to understanding this, which is there was a Hungarian-American psychologist, this guy Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who had a thesis. High performers in these various disciplines, athletes, artists, scientists, inventors, they seem to get into these concentrated states where they do the thing that they're famous for, the thing that moves the world forward. And they describe that state in very similar ways. What's that about? So like, Prometheus, you want to go up to Mount Olympus, steal some fire from us and come down, give it to the rest of us, right? So he did his research. At the end of it, he wrote the book Flow, the seminal work on this. It's why we call it a flow state, because of Mihai. And I love that he said this. He said, I chose this word flow because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found, which is we are all on the river trying to paddle ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you forward. You go further, you go faster. It magnifies your efforts. And that's what these people do. So he wrote, I'm sure you read the book, he wrote about, here are the characteristics of a flow state. You lose track of time, your distractions are blocked, you're focused on the task, you're doing your best work. It returns you energy instead of draining you from energy when you're done, and various other things. And he said, there are some conditions precedent that people set to get into this state, to make it more available, right? I didn't know the term flow state when I first experienced one. It was just kind of like, whoa, what was that? I was flying from here. I'm in Austin, south of you. And I was going to San Francisco. And the next day I was going to meet with my team. I thought, you know what, on the flight, I'm going to go into Figma and mock up this design for this thing I think we should build, right? This feature. Got on the flight. Alaska runs a nonstop from here. Wi-Fi was out. Plane took off. was going to land 15 minutes later. I'm like, the engine fell off. Something bad happened to the hydraulic system. Like, they don't want to tell us until we're on the ground, but something awful happened, and we're in Dallas.
Yeah.
Look down, over 2 hours and 40 minutes had gone by since I looked at the clock. We were in San Francisco. I had no concept. I also couldn't tell you if the drink cart came by. I didn't know my seatmate's name, nothing, but my designs were done. And I thought they were good. And I was like, wow, what happened? And I had prepared myself for the usual experience of, okay, I'm going to get to the hotel, grab a sandwich in the lobby, run up to the hotel room, and I'll finish this before I go to sleep. In reality, I called a buddy of mine. I was like, hey, man, I have a free night in SF. You want to go have dinner? And that was kind of a magical experience. Later, discovered this is a flow state. This is something you can replicate. You can reproduce this on your own. Like, there are smart people who've written many things about it. So I know everything we talk about here today that's helpful for people. This is because you and I stand on the shoulders of giants, as Newton would say, right? So a lot of what I do with my life now is educate people on flow states. Here's how to get into them. You don't need my app or anyone's app. You can actually practice on your own. We just made an app that makes it more accessible and it packages everything together for you. Just make it easy. So that's what I think is super interesting, because it does unlock you to do the things you're capable of and get over like procrastination, distractions, that sort of thing. So hope that was a good answer. It was a long one.
No, it's a great answer. I love that. And thank you for all the context there. I think that's important, because I think we've all experienced that to some degree. And it's like, oh, that's a thing that you can actually set the conditions for. And I think that I think I know the answer to this question now, but I was curious as I was researching.
Okay.
It's worth noting that Sukha means happiness through self-fulfillment. So how does that relate to the user experience here?
That is a wonderful question. Actually, the answer speaks to my heart. So I'm going to give you a robust answer. Laura, my wife, she and I met in yoga. When I had one of those failed startups, I left town. I lived in New York for 2 years and just wanted to like cleanse my soul and not bump into anyone and just like figure out what I wanted to do. I married the girl on the yoga mat to my left. So we got married. I had a working version of this website with a working title. We had early members who were using it, giving us feedback, and we're developing. And remember, listen, I was like really trying to be like, tell me what's working, tell me what's not, tell me what's working, right? So we're developing this. And I knew we needed a great name for it. So we were flying on our honeymoon. I'm very grateful in a place in my life where we can go to Bali for a couple of weeks and hang out and do that, because it's a great place to do yoga and just be on the beach, be together. Hey, we're married, right? So I mentioned to Laura, I said, you know what? I really want to find a great name. Like, it's not descriptive, like, oh, flow state website or a distraction blocker website, but something like Amazon's not called like bookstore website. You know what I mean? Like Nike's not called like shoe store.
Yeah.
But when you understand like, oh, Nike, got us a victory, you're like, oh, that's a really cool idea inside that name. So maybe the next couple of weeks, still while we're here, something bubbles up. I'm hoping the universe speaks to me and I get that name, because I need to title this and like buy a website and do a formal thing, right? And Laura's like, I wish that for you. So we got there. I said, something that might help me is today, the first day, do you mind if I talk to like 2 or 3 of our current members and just go, what's your favorite feature? Like, tell me why I use this. Maybe that'll bubble up over the next 2 weeks. My unconscious mind will be like, here's what you should call it, right? She was like, great, I'm going to the pool. I will see you at dinner. I'm like, okay. So 3 people said, hey, you know what? I'll chat with you for 5-10 minutes. I did those. Hey, do you love the flow music? Do you love the timers? Do you love the phone blocker, the website blocker? Like, what is it you love, right? The third guy, I was going into the wrap up. I was like, Ryan, I promised 10 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time. We've been chatting, so I'm going to let you go. This is really helpful for me. And the guy, whom I did not know that well, he said, Steven, you asked the wrong questions. And I was like, okay, dude, I don't know. Like, what was the right question? And he's like, you should have asked me, why do I pay you? And I was like, we charge like $10 a month. Like, I don't collect a paycheck. Tony and I do this for free because we just think it's a cool thing to do. So it's not that expensive. Okay, but I'll take the bait. Why do you pay me? And he said, I found the last year or two, I have 2 kinds of days. At 3 o'clock, I can be playing with my kids. They're currently 2 and 4. Or at 6 o'clock, I can be like, where the hell did the day go? I suck. I didn't get the big thing done I needed to get done. He's like, I realized the difference is, did I hit play in your website before I started work? So I pay you because my kids are not going to be 2 and 4 forever. Okay, you won that round. Got it.
Yeah, right.
So I go to dinner with Laura. I was like, I talked to this guy today who's more articulate about what I do than I am. And this is what he said. She's like, that's really good. You should hire him. Like, that's really, really good. So we were brushing our teeth, going to bed. and, our little bathrobes, our first day of our honeymoon, feel like we've been to the spa. And she looked at me and she's like, in yoga, we hear all these Sanskrit concepts, these words, prana, your life force, and karma, dharma, your duty. She's like, the universe, you wanted the universe to speak to you. The universe spoke to you through that dude. He described Sukha. He said to you, I want to feel like I'm in my lane, doing the thing I'm good at, where I can do it with ease. She said, you've been thinking about naming your tool after like the features. She's like, no, he's trying to tell you what he cares about is not the phone thing or this. He cares about where it gets him, the destination. He's playing with his kids. She's like, you should call it the Sukha Company. And I went on my little phone for $14 from a hotel room in Bali. I bought the website, the Sukha Company, the happiness company. And I called Michael, my partner. I was like, guess what? We have a name.
Yeah.
Here we go.
What an incredible story. I love that the whole way through. And I love it just so, you said a couple of times, just letting the universe just guide you in this. It's funny because just to tie our stories together, I remember my journey to this podcast and all the things I'm working on sort of started at this moment after I was divorced. And I said, well, I'm just turning it over to the universe at this point. I don't know what to do.
I hear you. Yeah.
But it is interesting what comes up there. And so I was looking at some of the features inside, and I noticed there's one benefit for the distraction blockers, such as like a QR code to use your phone.
Yeah, dude, this is me. I'm telling you, a lot of this is because I know how I'm broken, and I can tell you exactly where that comes from, which is I noticed when I'm working and I get distracted, I do how did I end up wasting half an hour in scrolling the news or WhatsApp or TikTok? How does it happen? It would be, I'm working on something and it's going relatively well. I feel like I'm in flow, and then I'll hit that thing with, I'm coding and the build keeps failing and I'm trying to debug it. I can't find it. That frustration grows, or I'm writing a blog post and I know it's not good and I have to rewrite it, but the muses are not singing, And in that moment, muscle memory, my hand will reach over my phone and go, well, why don't you just, take a moment and let your brain rest and just like check your WhatsApp. Did Ryan WhatsApp you? Is Eric doing something, right? And that always turns into, oh my God, how could it be 6 o'clock? Like, well, I didn't finish that thing. So when I looked at it, I thought, okay, so my phone's bad. Sometimes YouTube, sometimes websites. There are a couple websites that get me.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't want to download an app. I'm sick of downloading apps. I don't want to do this thing. What's the easiest thing I could do to help me? And it was simply this. When I hit play in the morning and, my music starts and the coach welcomes me, is like, okay, a little QR code comes up. I can tap it with my phone, put my phone down. If while I'm in my session, I touch my phone, the little smart assistant says, hey, Steven, is your phone helping you? And then it just gives me that one moment to choose, who do I want to be? Do I want to be that guy at 3 o'clock? Or do I want to be that guy at 6 o'clock? And that's sometimes all I need, just like a friend next to me going like, Ryan, like, what are you doing? And same thing with the websites. You can put in your own list of websites. We give you like 20 that are obvious. You shouldn't be on, these sites. You can add your own. And if you open it up, get a little pop-up in the middle. It goes, is Facebook helping you? And you can say yes or no. And it's just, if you want to waste your time on Facebook, if you want to use your phone, you can. But you get that one moment of like a buddy sitting next to you going like, Puri, come on. Like, who do you want to be? And that's what we did. And it works gangbusters for me.
So this is like a routine that I learned at the Flow Research Collective. It's like a morning routine. I would get up and do like a 10-minute meditation. And
awesome.
then I would put on my headphones and I use the like binaural beats. Brain FM is
great. Brain FM's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. And then I literally would just put a Post-it note on my phone. Well, I would set timers for Pomodoro timing. I'd have I have a timer here, and then I'd put a Post-it note on my phone that'd be like, say out loud what you're going to do on your phone, just because sometimes it is that. It's like, okay, now I'm on it. And it's like, okay.
I love that.
And well, I'm sitting here thinking about this and I'm like, wow, he put every single thing that I do in the morning on like a website. Well, how come I'm not a member
Brian,
of it?
You nailed it. That was the idea. It was just saying like, here are the tools that Mihai lays out, and smart people have talked about them, but I didn't want to have like one app for the music, one app for the timer, one app for the distraction blocker, an app on my phone. And I was just like, can I just have one thing I open, hit play on the morning? I would love that. That is a habit I can stick with, as opposed to like, let me open every damn thing. So you just nailed it. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I just, that's why I said it's it's serendipitous where, I connect with some people on this podcast and you hear, because I'm like, okay, what are the features of Sukha. And I'm like, oh, okay, I do that. I do that. I
I
wonder.
love that you've been part of like the Flow Research Collective and all that. They've done great work, and like Reendorse and those guys are like really like put a lot of effort of their lives into how do we help people be great. Like that's super cool. You're the first person I've met that in the wild, not that I met through the Flow Research Collective, but just in the wild, been like, oh yeah, I've done that. I totally get this. That's super cool.
Yeah, it definitely it stuck out to me because when I was younger, music was sort of what they would call it, the Flow Research Collective, the primary flow source for me. So I taught myself how to play guitar and drums and all this, but the reason why is because I would go down there. I remember, and this is, I was 12, 13, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I'd be down playing the guitar and all of a sudden 4 hours would pass, and
Yeah.
my dad would be banging on the basement to shut that thing off, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been here for 4 hours. And I never thought much of it, but
I have a question for you, and I'm going to give you a
yeah.
story.
Okay.
Question is, when you do actual knowledge work, right? You're not playing music to play music, but you're doing knowledge work. What is your oral environment? What's the thing that gets you like, I'm in it, I'm staying in it?
Typically I'll use the focus part of the brain,
Yep.
FM, or like
Fantastic.
binaural beats,
Yeah.
and that really helps.
I completely agree. Brain FM and Dell. Yeah, there are some fantastic music only apps out there. I'm going to tell you something I learned because when I was starting Sukha, and we had an early version of this running. A buddy of mine had started this and he had a baby to go do his thing. And I was developing this into a flow state app. And I knew music was a big part of it. There's so much research people have done on like how music helps you get into flow sooner, stay in it. And the research, most of it pointed to the sweet spot is 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, non-vocal, ambient kind of thing, right? So, okay, great. I happen to have a bunch of friends who are film composers who have time on their hands.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy, what are you doing? Can you write some music, for me? So we got like 1,000 hours of original music. It's all, organized into different playlists, like more upbeat kind of stuff, like sonic caffeine, we call it, or it's like more down tempo. We call it atmospheric, ambient atmospheric sort of sounds. And then binaural came up. I was, I think, NSF at the time, and binaural was really popular then, catching on around the same time as like microdosing psilocybin if you were coding, or microdosing LSD while you're coding. That was really popular. So we launched a couple binaural. Lo-fi became popular, launched a couple lo-fi, right? And here's the curveball. So buddy, Julian, who is a sound mixer for LucasArts, right? Doing the Star Wars games, stuff like that up in Marin, came back and was like, hey, this is going to sound super weird. My son graduated from high school, and his high school graduation present was he wanted to go to Nepal. I just got back. When I was there in Kathmandu one day, it rained, like rained. It was this lush, beautiful sound. I recorded 2 hours because I had my audio stuff with me.
Hey, that's incredible.
Do you want it? And I was like, that is kind of weird, but I've seen weirder things. Like, okay, cool. So he gave me this MP3 or a WAV file or something. It was like 2 hours of rain in Kathmandu. And in between all of the lo-fi and the ambient, we just stuck a playlist to see if people would find it and dig it. We called it Himalayan Dream Rain. It is our third most popular playlist now.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound weird to me at all.
Okay, but I was learning. This is, again, like there are things there are things you don't know. This is something I didn't know because I was like, well, let's work with people like, what the hell is it? My computer's broken. It's playing rain. I don't know we did that. So then I could see who was listening to it. I queried someone. I was like, hey, man, don't want to bug you, but can you just tell me, like, what's this about? Like, what's the appeal? And people talked about it. It brings me back to when I was young. I was in Georgia, and I'd be studying. It was always this rain outside, whatever it was. I grew up in this place that had this kind of rain. It evokes this place and time in my life. It's very specific. It helps me focus. I was like, oh, that's cool. So I started asking, what else is like that I wouldn't think of? It's non-musical oral environment, sound environment. A number of people talked about these naturescapes. So we found recording of a stream in Japan, the surf in Cyprus. Someone said they really missed coffee shops. So, like, I've had kids since the pandemic, and I used to go work in a coffee shop. That was my thing. We found a recording of a coffee shop in Vienna, Austria. We called it Cafe Vienne. It has its following where people just want to work, listening to like the espresso, and the plates clattering kind of thing. And I learned a lot. Again, I think it's from that listen where it's like, Steven, you don't know, but you want to do something. So let people contribute to what it is. And if our platform works, it is because of the people who've said, what if you tried this? Like binaural beats, like rain, like coffee shops, things like that. That was the story. I'm done. Dude, back to you. Back
No,
to you in the studio running.
that's great. It is. It's funny because I don't. I realize now it's like I actually invested in like a second pair of AirPods in case I forget to charge them. I'm like, am I addicted to like this brain tap? Because I just am like, oh, what happens if I can't do that? And it is funny. It was just
Dude,
a
there
thought.
are worse addictions. I mean, like, don't beat yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. I thought that too. It's like, okay, addiction, has a connotation to it, but yeah, certainly I never saw that being powerful. And it's funny. I was trying to explain to my partner. I was like, I love this song. And so I like get it and started playing it. And it was something on Brain FM, but it's like it's a 40-minute song called Deep Something. And I was like, well, there's this part coming up. And I realized that it's experiential, and we're talking about a 40-minute song. You can't, it's like, oh, okay. I was like, yeah, you got to listen to the first 25 minutes till it gets to this part. And then I don't know, there's an experience there that I
It's true.
didn't quite understand.
Let me tell you something that I learned also is, yes, that way of saying like, hey man, just listen to this little part of the song. And it doesn't really have the effect of like, I've been in it for 25 minutes. And now when it hits me, it hits, right? Something that we noticed, Tony and I, with Sukha is a lot of people try it for like 5 or 10 minutes and they never return. And what we realized is they'll be like, oh yeah, I totally want to work healthier, work faster, do my best work. They'll hit play and they're accustomed to some, magic jumps out of the box and hits you. So after 5 or 10 minutes, they're like, okay, so it's just kind of music. Okay, I don't really get it. And the first time users, if they actually did a session, like 60 minutes or more, invariably they signed up. At the end of that week, they did a couple sessions and they signed up to pay. And it was this big bifurcation. It was like, I tried it for 5 minutes. I don't get it. It's music, whatever. Or they did it and they looked up and went, wow, like my shit's done. Like, let's do that tomorrow, right? And it was so interesting how they just diverged like that. So what we did, and this was insight into building apps, is we realized that was a really important barometer or determinant of if you understood flow, if we could deliver a good experience. So now when you onboard, we have a screen that specifically says, do you have a task that's going to take you like an hour to do? Because if you have that, dive in. If you don't, just leave, like abandon now, because you're not, no, seriously, this is a waste of your time. You're going to use this for 5 minutes and just go, it's a music app and I don't get it. And now very few people actually finish onboarding without doing a 60-minute session. And again, just learning, because I never thought of that people have tried so many things. They're going to try something for 5 minutes and that's their judgment on what it is. And when you have something that requires like, it's like a habit, like a muscle, you just like, let's do it. Oh, this was an amazing experience. Let me do it tomorrow. And you fall into that rhythm. That's the way to actually change your life. As many people with Atomic Habit, so many people have written about habits. I'm not going to, pretend I'm Charles Duhigg or, James Clear or anything, but it is a thing. Again, #learning.
I want to ask this next question in sort of the context of this theory that I have, and I think it sort of ties in with like my work as a coach and my own personal and self development.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this idea that if you think of things through resources, and it could be money, it could be energy, it could be love, just a resourcing lens. My theory is that when people are sort of fully resourced and whatever resources are most significant or important to them, the reflex of that is to want to help people. And I believe that that's sort of there's something universal there. And so one of the ways in which I think a lot of people do that and find meaning in, and I guess I'm sort of asking if you would consider yourself in this, is that this platform, Sukha, is obviously meaningful to you. I can tell by how you're describing it. But there's a word, probably a year ago, I would have considered this sort of a benign word, but you are facilitating something for people and you're finding tremendous sort of personal fulfillment in that. Perhaps I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
no, you see me clearly, and it feels great to be seen. Thank you for saying that. Go on.
Yeah, no, and so I just wanted to say, first of all, what do you think of that? Is that something you're experiencing? Like you're before it was like we're creating something that we're hoping people will access, but when we look at it through like a facilitating lens, like I'm creating a space for people to be creative and more importantly, be in flow and focused on what they're here to do, purposeful. I don't know. What do you think of that? And how do you see yourself playing into that theory if you did?
It is a really thoughtful question, and I'm going to try to give you as thoughtful an answer as that. So I don't believe that we vote every 4 years. I believe we vote every day, dozens of times, for the world that we want to live in. Voting is not just like, here's the guy or girl I choose to be president. Voting is how do you treat the girl at the supermarket. Voting is whether you cut the guy off on the on-ramp. You vote, you put your energy in all of these little decisions into the world to say, this is how I believe the world should be. So yes, if you put your energy toward, I would like the world to be one where people feel like they're doing the thing they're meant to do. They're not as stressed out. They're not down on themselves. They have the ability to create the life that they want. That affects everyone's world around them. If you can help one person do something great where they're like, man, I feel abundance. Now I can share abundance. I mean, it can be reductive and you're like, oh, it's a pay it forward world where it's like you help one person, they help one person. But it's also the thing of just like, if you enable someone to be who they could be and not be the guy who's sitting on the sofa at 80 being like, I could have been somebody, imagine the effect that has on their kids, or her kids, right?
Yeah.
That's powerful, especially, in a world right now that feels very divided. Wherever you stand on the political spectrum, I think you'll agree that it's like we've really emphasized our divisions as opposed to our unity. And I think one of the things that helps is when you feel good about your life, you feel like you can share more good.
Yeah.
And I think it was Reagan who said this. I could be misquoting, but I'll share it anyway, because I think it's true regardless of who said it, right? Which is a reporter had asked Reagan, you're known as this great communicator, this great people person who can understand and read people and the whole thing. How do you do that? Like, do you fundamentally see people as being evil or good, or kind of, how do you read people so well? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, I don't believe people are good or evil. I believe that you need to understand how someone sees their glass of water. And I don't mean how much water is in their glass. What I mean is, how do they see it? They may see a glass that's almost full, but all they can see is what's missing. And they're going to act from scarcity. And you can predict their actions. You can understand how to deal with them, because even though it's 9 out of 10 ounces are there, all they focus on is that 1 ounce is missing, as opposed to someone else who might have 3 out of 10 ounces, but they feel abundance. And then you can understand how they're going to relate to the world. And he said, if you do that, then you're able to actually say, I can relate to you. I understand where you're coming from. He said, that's my secret.
So first of all, I thought you did that story great justice. Steven, you're really a provocative and interesting storyteller. I love the way that.
Thanks. Because I've been around a lot of great storytellers. That is why.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. I think that, that's a great way to put it. It depends on how you see that glass of water, not necessarily how much is in there or
Exactly.
whether it's that full. It's about how do you see it, and I think that there's a lot of truth in that. So, I wanted to shift a little bit just to ask you a couple of questions about remote work, because you're sort of seen as somebody who solved a lot of problems that came along with this idea of remote work, and you were sort of ahead of the curve before COVID happened and sort of forced everybody into that. But
do you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Okay, so here's something a lot of people don't realize is, yes, the pandemic was a shock to the system, where a lot of people who are accustomed to, hey man, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, we need to sit under the same fluorescent bulbs in order to work, right? And suddenly, oh my God, if we do that, we'll kill each other, right? We're all contagious. And, Zoom became a verb. A lot of things changed, but it was a big adjustment. Here's the thing to think about, which is going to sound obvious. After I've said it, you're going to be like, yeah, but most people don't think about this. For 100 years, the evolution of a film goes through remote, hybrid, in-person, RTO kind of work. Every film begins with writers writing remotely from their home, their writing partner's living room, coffee shop, stuff like that, right? At a certain point, one of those ideas gets some traction. It gets a little money behind it. You open a production office. So 2 days a week, you're in there. You and I are sitting around. You're the location scout. You're like, okay, Steven, what does it look like? Where should we shoot this? I'm going to go off for a couple of days to Montana and see if I can find a place for us to shoot that scene. The costumer goes off. The writers get notes. Brad Pitt wants to play it, but he wants to play it as a Southern gentleman. Go do a rewrite. Everyone disperses, you know what I mean? They go and do their own thing for a few days a week, come back together next week, a couple of days, right? Then it's RTO. You're on set day and night for months at a time, working your ass off. And then it goes back to picture editors and sound editors in dark rooms working, people coming in and out, and eventually back to remote. Now, if you were to say to anyone in film 10, 20, 50 years ago, I see you're in the remote phase of your film, people would be like, huh? What the hell are you talking about? But if you were to say to them, you're in development. Oh, I see you're in prep. You're in pre-production. Oh, you're in post-production. Oh, you're in production. Those are the terms that were used. But because for 100 years, that's how films worked. Leaders know how to lead through each of those periods. and individual contributors know how to contribute because it's established. It's like, this is what you do. This is how you're accountable. This is how you inspire people. This is how you keep things on track. And you make mistakes and you learn. Each of those periods exists. That what you touched upon is, I am fortunate that I got to see and participate in a lot of films where you see how remote work can work. And I recognize now that, in this current period, the pendulum is swinging back towards remote work, right? It will arrive at a new equilibrium. It will not be where it was before the pandemic. It's going to move slightly more towards hybrid remote because now people are like, wow, what an amazing thing. There's a great designer that I want to work with who's in Dubai, who doesn't live 20 minutes from our headquarters. We could work with her. There's a great software engineer in Montreal. We could work with that dude, right? So there's some of that pull of things opened up. There are advantages to this, as well as there is often fear. And, there are a lot of people who come to me with Sukha who have teams, and they ask me stuff like, well, can I use this to supervise my team? And is there surveillance? Can I tell who's working? And I'm like, no, dude, this is not that. Sorry. If you want that, go get Time Doctor or get one of those apps that gives you like metrics on whatever, how many keystrokes people do. We're so uninterested in that. I can't even put it in English words, right? So the thing when you do talk to some of those leaders and you just dig down and like, well, tell me, why do you want to do that? Okay, well, why that? Would you generally, what I've found, and this is anecdotal, this is not data, right? This is anecdotal, is that a lot of it is fear. I don't know what people are doing if I can't see them. And it takes a while to get someone to say that out loud because they're like, well, it's about, productivity and team spirit. And trust me, there are some things that are absolutely better in person. I've never been part of a story meeting, like a creative meeting over Zoom or Google Meet that has any of the quality of when sometimes you're around a table or a coffee shop or by a whiteboard. And it's like, you're saying, Steven, I don't know, the end of the third act, it feels like the dragon's not doing, like there's something about being in the room with some of those creative things. Like, what could this feature do that is just, you want to smell each other and feel each other and it's just better, right? I don't think that's bad. That's good. Acknowledge it. But there are other things where it's like, hey, Ryan, I'd really love for you to go off. Go do some deep work. Come into the staff meeting on Monday, not with all my Slacks are returned. My inbox is 0. Come to the staff meeting where you're like, dude, like I thought about this thing. And you say it, and everyone in this meeting is like, we should do that now. Like, we should leave this meeting and go try that feature out. Like, that changes the trajectory of our company. And that doesn't come from sitting under the fluorescent lights and in between meetings for 12 minutes. You kind of like think great thoughts. As Cal Newport would say, like, there is a quality of deep work and there's a quality of shallow work. And so for that reason, I think, and I know this is a long answer, but it's a robust one. I hope it's helpful, which is, yeah, there's a reason to be remote. There's a reason to be in person. If you are a leader who says, how do I create the wins? What I'm focused on is not necessarily supervision of people, but rather I think the people I've hired have greatness inside them. And my job is to give them the conditions where they are great, because our team will win, our company will, our industry will win. If you're trying to cure cancer, find the people that want to do that. You know what I mean? Like, some of the RTO problems are hiring problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. You sort of answered this question, but I was going to ask you what you thought about the difference between human connection via mediums such as like digital technology or just being under those fluorescent lights, like you said. And you said, I could smell you. I can, but what is that difference for you?
I'll say there are activities that I do, or that, people that I've worked for, with, or work for me do, where I'm like, there's just a higher quality if you're not distracted by other people coming by being like, hey, Ryan, want to go to lunch? Or, hey, could you have that TPS report? You know what I mean? That sort of thing. If you ever watch Office Space, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That you don't really need that, okay, kind of like thing around you to go deep and say, what if we were to actually do this? But there are some activities where you do want to vibe in person and have that. I want to see your face really well when I say this. And I want you to know that when you say, well, Steven, no, actually not that. Remember, Salesforce tried that and it didn't work, but you made me think of this, which I don't know anyone's tried. And you can see on my face, it's okay that you yes-anded me. You're like, well, yeah, that maybe it doesn't work, but this, and it's harder to do that on little postage stamp videos of people you work with on a screen. It's not the same. And I'm a huge advocate for remote work, but I do not believe that there's not a place for being in person. I think it's just different colors on your palette. Red and blue and green are valuable, not just one.
Absolutely. You referenced this earlier, but there is kind of, I'm noticing with, several things that sort of happened during COVID, there's a pendulum swing back to the other way. And I'm hearing a lot a lot of rhetoric out there that's like, well, of course it's better to work in person. But I think, that's a red flag to me whenever I notice this big swing one way or the other. I'm like, what's really happening there? And I think you're right. We discovered some colors that worked, and we discovered some colors that used to work and still work. Right? And so
Yeah,
it's, how are you going to blend
exactly.
it go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just paint appropriately. You're not going to paint green skies, but now you have blue, and you can paint blue lakes and rivers and skies, and it's just use it when it's appropriate. And in-person work is awesome. It's not to be vilified. It's just, I'm serious. Like, I know a designer in Dubai. I couldn't work with that designer if I was like, if they don't live 20 minutes from, where we are in Austin, sorry,
Do
and
it.
they're super happy to be like contributing to something and living with their wife who's in university there, It's like, dude, good. Live your life.
Stephen, I want to be mindful of your time because we're coming up on at least what we scheduled. I have more time, but I just have a couple more questions for you. Is that okay?
I would love that you ask amazing questions. And if this is something where your listeners are like, this is dope and they're still listening, then let's go.
No, I think they will. I think that's the thing that I loved about podcasts at least when they first started, is that they were, they could be an inch wide and a mile deep. And that was really what I was looking for, And
Yeah,
I think we've kind of got an inch here deep and an inch here. And I think that's a bonus podcast if you ask me. But
it
you
is kind of
mentioned, I would be, I'm not sure even how I feel about this topic, but the topic of AI, it's changing, especially
yeah.
the way we work. And, there's a lot of, you can look on YouTube, to use social media as an example. It's the end of the world and this is going to save humanity. It's all over the place with theories and
Yeah.
ideas, but I don't know, from your sort of circle or bubble, how is AI impacting, I don't know, workplace in general, and maybe even movies and focus?
I agree. I'm not a doomsayer, but I agree that there are a large number of jobs that involve pattern matching, road work, that are just wiped out. They're just gone. It's a matter of days or months. It's not, will it happen? Right. And right now, people conflate LLMs, large language models, with AI as a general term, when AI actually encompasses a lot of things, right? So LLMs, the way they're currently structured, the models, they're glorified Google autocomplete. The same way you can type in Gmail and be like, today is very, and it corrects your spelling, or, you have to remember that LLMs are just like probability engines. They're like, hey man, I looked at this huge data set, and when Ryan or Steven type, today looks there's a 40% chance they're going to write rainy, or a 32% chance they're going to write sunny. Let me just try one of those and try and do an autocomplete. But instead of Google just like tiny bits, they try to autocomplete based upon not just words, but ideas and thoughts, right? Okay. So it's not really thinking. It has the illusion of thought because it's pattern matching with like a probability engine, thoughts that it digested, right? There are other models that actually, the other structures to this that are actually very interesting that are about, well, what if instead of training on this massive, pre-trained transformer, instead of training on this massive data set, what if they started from zero, just like a child, and learned and then had to figure out the rules of how tasks in the world worked, as opposed to just saying, well, every time someone writes, it looks like this out the window, they're going to write rainy, right? So all that said, I just want to define a little bit what's going to happen, because I do believe, yes, you're right. Everyone's right that's saying that some jobs are just gone, right? However, here's the thing that I think is more interesting and how I view this in a sunny way. If you were to say to Usain Bolt, hey man, we got this AI generated robot thing that runs a little bit faster than you. So how about you just sit this one out and we'll have it run for you? Usain would be like, that's terrible. I'm not enjoying that. The spectators would be like, what? We didn't come here to see a robot, right? But if you were to say to him, hey man, we used AI to look really closely at how your bone structure really works with this kind of turf or this kind of track, and we designed a shoe that's maybe like 10% better for your foot. Is that interesting to you? That might be very interesting to him. Maybe he shaves a tenth of a second off his time, or the spectators see a world record breaking thing because AI was applied this way, like it's being used in Formula One and some of these races. So that, I think, is a great way where you leverage it to increase human potential. So it's not, oh, hey, my attorney wrote our filing using AI and it hallucinated and quoted cases that don't exist, which God knows has happened so many times it's not even funny.
Yeah.
But it is something to say, like, using AI, maybe an LLM, my attorney did come up with some novel ways of presenting what we're going to present. And then, he or she are smart enough to check the case, the precedents, the case studies, and make sure that it's sound logic, but it really was a very quick way to leverage a lot of knowledge out there so that the human could still say, I think when we make this filing, this is probably the best argument we should lead with. That I think is super interesting.
Yeah, I think that we haven't quite understood how it's going to change things. I did so famously for myself. I did this. There's an app called Suno out there that creates music, and I
Yeah.
talk about a flow state. I sat there and I pumped in a bunch of things that seemed, just like not related, but there were things I liked. I was like, I really I like Dune, the books, and I put that for the context, and I really like this, the '90s punk stuff, and this is the first time using Suno, and I haven't had this luck since. But
Yeah.
I hit create, and it created, Steven, like a song that was like I listened to on repeat for like I don't know, a month, it's just, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I thought to myself, wait, how can this be? Like there's one line in it where he says, I was a man. And I'm like, wait a second, you were a man. How could I have them sing that? Because I put the lyrics in or whatever. But I went on this soul searching thing. I'd recorded an episode just kind of with my thoughts on it. But it's like, I'm not sure that how we would even know if it was being creative, but it just sort of reflected like an LLM would, what the next musical thing that made sense when it threw it in there. And it sounded enough like what I knew, but was slightly different, that it sounded original and something I was excited about. But I think that what that sort of on the positive side that challenges us to do is add more creativity to the zeitgeist, right? More originality, more humanness, right? And AI is just a great way right now, from especially the LLMs, I guess is sort of what I'm talking about, is to have ourselves reflected back to us.
Yeah. And to mention something about the kind of the film world is when you are like a senior executive at a studio, you get pitched a lot of material. A lot of people are like, let me tell you my story. You can buy this idea. And what you learn is that most writers write having seen a lot of movies. So you often can recognize, okay, so this is kind of the scene from, yeah, okay, got it. And then you're doing the emotional thing with the love interest from, yeah, okay, got it, and there's a shorthand to it and you can kind of feel it. And it works sometimes. Like people do want, like Laura, like at night, she wants to unplug and just watch a rom-com. She's like, I know it's formulaic. I know it's stupid. Just don't say anything. Just let me watch it. Right. And sometimes I'm not a fun person to watch a movie with because it'll be like, okay, watch. And the next scene is the one where Ryan's going to find some trinket that reminds him of his ex-partner, that thing. And it happens. And Laura's like, shut up, just go with the other room. Just leave me alone. Right. So there's a place for that. However, there are some writers you meet and they write deeply from human knowledge, from understanding humans, as opposed to, I've seen a lot of movies. This kind of scene usually follows that kind of scene. And that kind of writer, right? Stuff that moves the medium forward, So one writer is almost like an LLM. I can pattern match the 500 rom-coms I've seen. This is kind of the way they're written. This is what they're going to be. And another one says, I actually deeply watched, my friend go through this relationship in this way. And here's how I captured it in a very fresh, original way. And that's rare.
Yeah, I think that's, it's interesting. This just came up for me while I was listening to you explain that, is that I think that's another way it reflects sort of the way we collaborate too. AI does.
True.
And so it's kind of like we're not always clear. It's funny that you said that she likes to wind down with like a rom-com, and my partner, same thing. She watches, what is it called? Grey's Anatomy. And,
oh yeah. It's a great show.
I mean, it's funny because you can tell it's like formulaic, and she knows it is. And you can tell it's going to be like what's going to happen next, but it's still emotionally resonant to watch it, right? And to go through it. It's like, so there's two experiences. There's the experience of knowing and the experience of like actually emotionally going through it that still is powerful.
And is it terrible if it delivers a reliable emotional response? Like here in Austin, I like going to Hop Dotty and I have the same burger and I'm not upset going, oh, it's the same burger. It's so terrible. It's like, oh, I've been kind of craving this burger. Thank you for delivering an experience. I knew exactly what I was going to get. I felt the way I wanted to feel and I'm going on my way happy. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Other than maybe the calories and the cholesterol. But what's wrong with it? Like, come on, people.
So much. Well, this has been a really incredible conversation, Steven. Yeah,
Ryan, thank you for guiding us.
You're such a great storyteller. And I mean, it's really powerful. It's been great to sit on this side and just be awash in it, honestly. But I wonder, as we wrap up here, what's something that you thought I would ask you that maybe I didn't, or something that you wanted to discuss that we didn't get to?
Man, I feel like I think the best podcasts, and I'll tell you a funny story. A buddy of mine was for 14 years the global head of podcasts for Apple, right?
Wow.
I
Yeah.
never really listened to podcasts. I was always like, hey, Jim, that's awesome. I love what you do. This is what I do for work. I was at film. And I knew podcasts were a thing from back when he was doing like Serial and stuff and all that. And it's only recently that I've gotten super into podcasts. And I think that the best ones feel to me like I had dinner next to a table of really interesting people debating something. And I got to just eavesdrop in, be like, you should have been with me last night. Like there were these two guys at the table next to us that were like really smart talking about this thing. And I never really thought about that. Now I'm thinking about it. That experience thing is really great. You did a great job, I think, guiding us. And I hope whoever's listening at this point, like this has been worthwhile for you because this is a commitment of your time. And that is the only resource you can't buy more of, right? Time. Thanks for using it with us. I don't have a lot to add that we need to add right now because we covered a lot of stuff and I really enjoyed the way this went. So I will say this in closing, that if there's anything we talked about where someone out there is like, oh man, who's Cal Newport or what's that Hungarian guy's name or whatever, happy. My email address is very public. You're welcome to email me, Steven with a V at thesukha.co for the Sukha Company. So THESUKHA.co. Drop me an email and be like, hey man, I heard you on Ryan's pod. What's Cal Newport write about? And I will send you a link. I will not write you a 14-paragraph history of my life. I don't have time to do that, nor do you want to read it. But I do reply to my emails in 24 hours or less if I'm not sick or traveling or something. So that is an open offer if there's something we said that someone's like, I want to learn more.
Well, that's awesome. That's very generous of you as well, as you've been generous with your time today. We'll have that in the show notes. And also the website for Sukha again was the Sukha.
Yeah. THESUKHA.co. If someone wants to try that, and as I mentioned, it's a habit. Come with something you have to work on. Try it for an hour or two. Do it tomorrow and get the feel for that. And it's no credit card for 7 days. Like there's no gotcha, you forgot to cancel, we're billing you. You can use it 168 hours straight for a week for free. And if it works, great. Doesn't, find something that does because there's some great apps out there. Find what works for you.
Steven, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.